Conservative. Constitutional. It's the Andrew Cooperrider Show, keeping you informed on what's going on right here in Kentucky.
And good morning, Kentucky. It's Andrew Cooperrider, and you're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics from a constitutional and conservative point of view. On today's show, Trump has put out a video for Cameron. We'll take a look at the ag commissioner's race and the candidates in it. The Lexington City Council wonders aloud whether or not it can just go ahead and just be, outright racist when it comes to hiring and promotion decisions. And then finally, the new public school test scores and rankings are out for Kentucky. And well, it just doesn't look good. Now, for those of you who end up seeing me today, you'll notice that I'm wearing my I Love My Wife hoodie. And that is because it's my wife's birthday. So first, let me say happy birthday to Mrs. Cooperrider. Second, while I have other things planned today, nice dinner, things like that, wearing this I Love My Wife hoodie is one of my presents I make every year to my wife. The only time I would wear such an embarrassing garment is today. So please, if you see me, don't make fun of me. I'm trying to make a sacrifice for my wife. Now, remember, you can email the show at info@theandrewshow.com. That's info@theandrewshow.com. And not only can you catch the Andrew Cooperrider Show Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. on WZXI, that's 1280 AM, 94.1 FM, 95.5 FM, in the Garrett, Jessamine, Boyle, Lincoln, Madison County areas, as well as South Lexington. You can also catch each episode at 1 p.m. on all major podcasting and social media platforms. Just search Andrew Cooperrider. And if you want to catch that 9 a.m. airing, but you live outside the WZXI broadcast area, feel free to visit theandrewshow.com. That's theandrewshow.com. And you'll find a WZXI player where you can listen to the WZXI live anytime you'd like to. Now, yesterday, I spoke about if the Cameron campaign was going to be able to bring Trump into the election, whether that's for a rally or for something like that. And I actually had mentioned that I hadn't even seen a video for the Cameron campaign come out from the Trump election. Well, it turns out that a video was dropped onto Facebook. Let's go ahead and take a listen to Trump's message to Kentucky about Cameron.
Cameron is a young star who has done a great job as your Attorney General, always being fair but very, very tough. And the wonderful people of Kentucky know it. You've learned it, you've seen it, you've been watching it. He is strong, reliable, and loves your state and our nation. Daniel is a tremendous fighter on crime, lowering taxes, saving our Second Amendment, stopping inflation, and, of course, helping our great military and our vets. We love our vets. Daniel strongly supports law enforcement and is endorsed by the Kentucky Fraternal Order of Police, will not allow men to participate in women's sports, fully supports our teachers and getting our children caught up from the massive learning loss caused from Beshear's educational policies, which have been a disaster for Kentucky. He will eliminate Kentucky's income tax and will support the working men and women of Kentucky, just like I did for 4 great years. His opponent, current Governor Andy Beshear, has been a disaster for Kentucky. He endorsed crooked Joe Biden, which in itself is about as bad as it gets, whose economic policies are crushing your state, including inflation and energy, which are at an all-time high. Beshear is weak on crime and the Second Amendment. He's not doing the protection that it needs. They want to get rid of the Second Amendment. The Democrats are fighting hard to do that, and Beshear wants to help him. He also wants to raise your taxes and viciously shut down churches, small businesses, and schools. And you saw him do that very recently. 4 more years would be a disaster for Kentucky. So I have known and worked with Daniel Cameron for a long time, and he's good on every common sense policy there is. He's a common sense person. He will never let you down, and he has my complete and total endorsement.
So this really tells us two things. That video tells us a few things. First, Trump most likely won't be coming into Kentucky for a last minute rally or something else in these final few days, which, certainly that would be something that really push the Cameron campaign over the edge. And while Trump releasing this last push video, encouraging people to vote is really, really helpful, he's got to get it out there. I mean, he's got to get it on every TV station, every radio station, parts of this. He's got to get it on social media, pushed out there heavily. I mean, we are already on to early voting. We've got 4 days left till election day. I'm concerned with how late this video is coming out. It should have been out, like I said, 4 or 5 days ago and immediately on TV as soon as possible as well. I've said this time and time again. The Cameron campaign really needed to be firing on all cylinders here. And don't get me wrong, I think this election will be pretty close, and it is definitely possible that Cameron wins. I'm not saying it's not. Honestly, I'd give it almost a 50-50 shot. Beshear has had, of course, been up in the polls, but what's been odd as you're watching the polls is that Beshear hasn't really cracked 49%. For all the tens of millions of dollars Beshear has spent, his polling has remained pretty steady. He's polling at the same point he was several months ago. So that tells you that there does give some good opportunity for Cameron coming into it. Also, as well, historically, the GOP polls lower in Kentucky than it actually turns out to do. So that should also tip into Cameron's favor. So I'd give it a coin toss. I don't think he's going to walk away with it. I think it'll be within 3% either way. I could be wrong. I mean, Cameron could just blow him out of the water. But if he loses, this would just point to how badly his consultants got it wrong. I mean, we are in a majority Republican state with a governor who has been anything but bipartisan, but yet the inability to message properly and actually turn out the vote is leaving the door open for Cameron to be snatching a loss from the jaws of victory. Because it really is all in his favor. You've got a majority Republican state that has happened since Beshear's been in office. You have a plethora of things to hit him on. The problem is Beshear's able to get away with the bipartisanship. Additionally, is you gotta throw out some things too for people maybe to grab a little more grasp on. I understand, because I'm in politics, how the Cameron administration would be different or should be different than a Beshear administration. But to your layman walking around out there, they don't quite understand. And the devil you know is sometimes better than the devil you don't know. And one thing is, we do know the devil that is Andy Beshear. We've had him as our governor. And if you want people to pick you, well, you don't want to be the devil they don't know. You also want to be a devil they know. That means that when you're challenging an incumbent, you got to come strong with a lot of policies and a lot of differences in places where people will be able to see what the difference is between you and your opponent. As I said, they've already experienced the last several years under Beshear. So they're going to go ahead and they're going to be easily latched on there. We don't have to guess what that looks like. And if you're leaving voters guessing what it looks like while you're in office, well, that could be pretty difficult. And so I definitely think in their messaging, they should have done more of that, but we'll see what happens here the last several days. Maybe they do get this Trump video out there more. Well, coming up, it isn't just the governor's election occurring on Tuesday. I want to take a minute to look at the ag commissioner's race and the Herald Leader's endorsement of a person who lacks any kind of experience simply because, well, she marks some of their liberal wish list boxes that has nothing to do with farmers, farming, or agriculture. We'll have that after this short break. You're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics from a constitutional conservative perspective. We'll see you guys back here in just a few short minutes. And you are back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics from a constitutional and conservative perspective. And in this segment, we're going to be talking about the ag commissioner's race, the agricultural commissioner's race. That is a race between Sierra Inlow and Jonathan Schell. Earlier this week, I talked about the Herald Leader making candidate endorsements. And in the ad commissioner's race, the Herald Leader endorsed Sierra Enloe. And well, Jonathan Schell has sent them a nice response. So I thought we might take a moment to dig into why the Herald Leader says that they endorse Enloe and how their stated reasons make it even more clear that Sierra Enloe is not the choice for Kentucky. And somehow the Herald Leader also makes it clear that they don't really understand farmers or their concerns at all. Now, the article starts off by saying that Jonathan turned down their offer to sit down with the editorial board to receive their endorsement, something that surely must have hurt the Herald Leader's feelings and, well, their egos, of course. But Schell actually responded to them now after the endorsement came out. He said kind of why he didn't speak with them and made a few other cases for why people should elect him. And we'll look at that response a little bit later on. But then they just go on after they say that, they just go on and say, well, all we can figure out about Schell. So he turns them down. The article goes on where they're endorsing Enloe to just say that Schell just seems to be running against Biden and stopping Biden. I mean, their exact quote here is, judging from his ads and other comments, his only opponent appears to be the president, Joe Biden. Well, first, you don't generally run ads attacking your opponent and talking about what you're going to do versus them when, well, no one knows who they are. I mean, quite frankly, Sierra Enloe hasn't earned a response yet from Jonathan Schell to really go after her too much because, well, nobody knows who she is. She has to raise her own name ID. If you just attack somebody who's completely unknown, well, that can help raise their name ID. So obviously Jonathan's going to, or Schell is going to come out and be a little bit more careful about going right at her. Obviously, that can change in these final weeks and things. And I don't see every single campaign ad and everything out there. So maybe Jonathan Schell has gone off after her a bit in ads and things like that. But at this point, he hadn't. He hadn't even mentioned her. And that really upset the Herald Leader because, and that upsets candidates get kind of upset if they never get attacked because it means that like nobody really cared about you. Sometimes like you were never really a threat. It's kind of like a badge of honor to get attacked. And when that doesn't happen, it can hurt their egos, certainly. But this is also where the Herald Leader starts to show they really don't understand farmers or their concerns. I mean, the federal government, Joe Biden, and the regulations his administration puts forwards, such as, regulations on subsidies, on, just general USDA regulations, those types of things have a huge, large impact on the success, profit, and survival of farmers. And most of the time with the wrong leadership in place, the federal government is the greatest enemy of farmers. So maybe in the liberal wasteland noggins of these editorial board members, they just can't understand why fighting Biden and Biden's policies should matter to farmers. But that's because they think that, well, anyone who says anything bad about Biden, it must just, of course, be some kind of campaign rhetoric. It can't at all be about trying to sum up a very real issue going on with farmers in as succinct as possible tagline, because you only have 30 seconds or so to make an argument in these ads. So when you are so limited in what you can say, you've got to really condense that down and saying stopping Joe Biden is the easiest way instead of listing through all the Biden's policies that have really just damaged the Kentucky farmer. So after they get done bad-mouthing Schell, they get into why you should elect Sierra Enloe, who is a young woman out of LaRue County. Now, I only felt a need to tell you that Sierra Enloe is a woman and to clear that up because, well, to the Herald Leader, it's the most important solitary fact that you need to know. No, I'm not kidding. Okay, here's the Herald Leader's first few lines as it gets into talking about why they endorse Sierra Enloe, and I'm quoting directly from the article here. Enloe, who comes from a fifth-generation farming family in LaRue County, should get the job for numerous reasons. For one thing, it would be great in 2023 to elect a woman for the first time. Now, if the first reason why you should be elected to something or get a job is because you're a woman or a man, then you're a terrible candidate for that job. I mean, unless you're working in like maybe a medical profession or prison guard where, you want women working with women possibly, or men working with men, whether that's for privacy concerns, sexual assault concerns, those types of things. So maybe that gender really does matter there, but, gender shouldn't be your first qualification for any job outside of that. And it's certainly saying I'm a woman shouldn't be your first qualification for the agricultural commissioner's job, because, well, why would that matter at all in the job? I mean, do they think people won't buy or sell crops from a state unless the state has a woman ag commissioner? Do they think that food processors will only bring business to a state unless they have you don't have a female ag commissioner. So, we're a food processing company, but we're not going to go ahead and come to your state. No, of course not. They actually never tell you why her being a woman is actually important to the job. They just say it. They said first you should elect her because she's a woman. No need to continue on to qualify why that would be important at all. It's historic. So yeah, that's why you should do it, just because, what gender they are. I mean, it's just like liberals to focus on somebody's gender than anything else about them first to make a decision on whether or not you're going to support them or hire them, because that is how they think. And they just say it. No explanation. You should select her because she's a woman. Duh. Do you even need another reason? I mean, honestly, after that, you shouldn't even read the rest of the article. She's a woman, elect her. That's all that it needs to be said. But the Herald Leader in this article does bother to go on and list a few other reasons why you should vote for Enlow. Because she has an economics degree. Because she's worked with businesses in Louisville to help them grow. Louisville, known for their vibrant farming communities. She has helped commercial companies find new opportunities. Not for, not for farmers, but, big companies that can afford to pay her big consulting sums. She couldn't be bothered to really consult for farmers. Just the companies that can afford her, of course. The Herald Leader also says that while App Harvest has failed, App Harvest, for those of you who are unaware, was an indoor tomatoes, and they're growing tomatoes and strawberry. Tomatoes up near like Moorhead, strawberries down in Somerset, and then I think lettuce in Richmond. It was this giant indoor greenhouse company, and it, in case you've missed the news, has gone bankrupt. And Enlow says that, well, we need to keep pushing for those same kinds of deals. Yeah, it failed, but we need to push a deal like App Harvest, where, the taxpayer gave $60 million to that company, and then 1 year later it went bankrupt. I guess that's the kind of fresh ideas we can expect from Sierra Enlow. Ideas that have already failed and have cost you and I, the taxpayers, tens of millions of dollars as the government forced us to invest in them. But yeah, let's just keep rolling out those ideas. But something that's missing? In the entire article, the Herald Leader never once says you should vote for Sierra because she is a farmer. Could it be because perhaps, well, she isn't? She's an economic developer, maybe, for big cities, companies, and tech startups, sure, but for farmers? They never actually point to her farming experience as a reason to vote for her. They actually point to all kinds of other experiences she has had that has nothing to do with farming. In fact, in the entire Herald Leader article, it only says the word farm or farmer 4 times, and it never once in reference to why you should vote for Sierra. In fact, let's let Enlow herself tell us why you should elect her, what this race is about. Let's hear it from her.
This race is about economic development. Shouldn't the people of Kentucky hire an economic developer?
See, I hear it from her right there. Actually, this race is about economic development. Shouldn't Kentuckians hire an economic developer? Well, actually, Sierra, this race is about agriculture. You know how I know that? You know how you know that? Because it's in the name of the position. Agricultural commissioner. It'd be kind of helpful to hire someone for that position who has both government experience business experience for that economic development side, and also, importantly, farming experience. I mean, someone in that race, maybe who's held elected office in the Capitol before, maybe that might be somebody helpful to get elected. Somebody who can help get bills passed, who's gone through the process of getting bills passed, knows what goes in to getting legislation done in the state for Kentucky farmers, while at the same time having experienced it on the farm so he can understand what it is. And I said he, because that person in the race that does have all that experience, it isn't you. It isn't you, Sierra. Now we're running up against the clock, so coming up after this break, I'm going to go over for what Jonathan Schell said in response to the Herald Leader. I'll be going over that after this short break. You're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics from a constitutional and conservative perspective. We'll hear you guys. We'll see you guys back here in just a few minutes. Stay with us. Let's hear what Jonathan has to say back. We'll see you guys soon. Before the break, I was talking about the Herald Leader having come out and endorsed Sierra Enlow in the agricultural race, and about the fact that Sierra has no experience in farming and is the worst qualified candidate, despite what the Herald Leader may try to claim. Once again, their first reason why you should vote for her is because she's a woman, which, while I wouldn't not vote for someone because they're a woman, that isn't the first thing I look at when I'm voting for somebody. I don't care about your gender or your race or things like that. But then again, that's because I'm not a racist, sex-obsessed liberal. So, for me, I just care about a person's qualifications. And for Jonathan Schell's part and his qualifications, which are much better than Sierra Enlow's, he did respond to the Herald Leader. Now, I happen to know from running for office that the Herald Leader has a policy that they will only publish one op-ed from each candidate per race. They kind of have to publish it. They offer one per candidate, and Jonathan Schell used his one op-ed to write pretty much a one-paragraph response. I'm going to read it to you in its entirety because it's really not that long. That's what I love about it. And here is his response. I've spent this campaign meeting and talking with Kentucky farmers and voters where they are. I haven't spent a single minute worrying about liberal editorial boards. The voters I've been talking to are struggling in an economy forced on us by Joe Biden. They feel frozen out of the economy, frozen out of the workforce, and frozen out of being able to express themselves without facing some ridiculous woke backlash. They are the farmers and factory workers, the nurses and teachers who keep our country running. They deserve to be heard, and on November 7th, they will be heard loud and clear. I feel their frustration as Kentucky's next ag commissioner. I will fight every day to build a better future for Kentucky agriculture. Will lift up our entire state. My opponent is not a farmer and would only spend her time supporting Biden for re-election. The difference in values and experience are clear. Together, we can stop Biden and save Kentucky. I'd be grateful to have your vote. That's it. That's the entire article. That's all he sent in. And what's funny is in Schell's response, and what tells you the focus too, in Schell's response, the word farmer appears 4 times across 171 words. And then the article wrote about the Herald Leader, about why you should vote for Sierra Enlow. The word farm does appear also 4 times, but that's across 514 words. I mean, the focus seems pretty clear. I love too how Schell made them publish an article where you call out their editorial board for being liberal hacks, which they are. And when it comes to people saying that they will fight, that's the kind of fighting I want to see, not just in the government, but fighting against the liberals that push all kinds of policies and people that will hurt Kentucky. Now, on to our next topic here that I think is worth discussing, and that's the Lexington City Council is openly considering racist and sexist hiring policies for raises and advancements. This article comes from the Lexington Times, which is a online it's an independent online publication. It's definitely more liberal leaning. I can tell you that because, for an example, I found this article under the heading equality. So any newspaper that has an entire category or news publication that has an entire category dedicated to equality, it kind of tells you where their values are. And this is the article here. It says, Lexington City Council examining pay equity issues. This is by Stu Johnson at WEKU. So Lexington City Council members have taken a deeper dive into pay equity issues involving well over 1,000 employees. Both the administration and council say there's still work to do. Urban County Government Human Resource Director Tamara Walters presented the comparison of employee pay by race, ethnicity, and gender. She concluded by saying a previous study showed no statistical disparity within pay grades. So they're having a hearing on whether or not the city of Lexington and their hiring practices or hiring and pay is somehow discriminating against people based upon their gender or their race. And what they've concluded is no, there's not there. But in an attempt to still have something to swing at, because there is a real shortage of racism and sexism going on in this country. You see the demand for it by the leftists, by the liberals, in order to push down edicts, in order to control everything, in order to paint a picture that we're all nothing but a bunch of down, dirty, racist, sexist pigs. They need us to be that, but we're not. Most of us, the vast majority of us, are good people. And so they need to see a difference in pay grades, but they can't find it. It's not there. You can't see a difference in pay. So that then leads to Council Member Liz Sheehan saying, well, the issue still needs attention. And this is what she said, quoting from the article. You don't see a difference within those pay grades, which is important to note. But we do have work to do across pay grades and those promotion opportunities. To which now it turns into Dan Wu, the vice mayor, wondering aloud to Walters, to the HR person, whether there's a way to get more women and minorities into higher pay grades through channeling opportunities. This is his quote here. You know, the goal is to make sure that employees, I'm sorry, that's not his quote here. This is a quote from Walter. So he asked, can we channel more women and minorities into higher pay grades? So basically, is there a way that when we're looking at promoting people or hiring people to higher pay grades, that we could just go ahead and consider their sex and race? Is there a way that we could just hire people based upon the color of their skin or what they identify as? Is that possible? Well, Dan Wu, I would tell you, typically that'd be illegal. It's illegal to hire somebody based upon their skin color or gender. In fact, you're supposed to completely ignore that. Recently, the Supreme Court had weighed in on this, saying that these types of affirmative action type behaviors by universities were unconstitutional. And I don't quite see how a city government can get away with saying this. And the fact you'd even wonder this out loud, actively pushing for a way to discriminate based upon skin color and gender for city hiring. I don't understand how he can get away with this legally. I mean, he can get away with it. And of course, he'll probably be reelected for it because, of course, all the liberal white upper class people who have been beat into the liberal far left religious beliefs of believing that, well, the fact that they're a man and white and straight, or a woman, white, straight, and wealthy means that they have done a great sin to society, and therefore they have to atone for it. And they atone for it by putting in place these kinds of policies or being okay with them. Meanwhile, the average worker, the middle-class worker of all skin color, of all races, of all genders, is just trying to get a job. I mean, imagine, if you would, that you work for the city, you're a white male, you have tons of experience, you've been working hard, and then somebody else gets promoted over you simply because they're the right gender or skin color. Would that make you feel good? We shouldn't care. It shouldn't matter. Once again, gender, skin color, it shouldn't matter. We should be looking at hiring the best people for the job. That is what your taxpayers deserve. We don't deserve to have people who are not qualified for their jobs getting hired and paid with our tax dollars, spending our tax dollars simply because they have the right skin or the right gender. They're the right race or gender, and that's all that we care about. That's all that's important. It goes back to that Herald Leader article I was talking about, where the first thing they cared about was the fact that Sierra Enloe was a woman. And now, because it's not their money, now keep in mind, if this was their money, they'd be trying to hire the best people for the job. But because it's taxpayer funds, let's just get racist and sexist in our hirings. And if you're a white male, don't even bother applying for a raise or promotion. We're not interested in you. That's the message Dan Wu is sending. Well, after this, we're going to go over what the human resource Walter's response was and some of the other council members' response was to this conversation. We'll have that after this short break. You're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for constitutional and conservative viewpoints on Kentucky politics. We'll see you guys here in just a few minutes. And you are back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics from a constitutional and conservative perspective. You know, before the break, we were talking about the Lexington City Council challenging the human resource directors to see if they could put in place racist and sexist hiring practices, basically hiring people and promoting people only if they have the right skin color or the right gender. So I go back to this Lexington Times article. So Vice Mayor Dan Wu asked Walters if there's a way to get more women and minorities into higher pay grades through channeling opportunities. This is Walter's response. You know, the goal is to make sure that all employees have that understanding. But yes, we want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to move because, like I said, those opportunities are so few and far between. So we want to make sure employees are prepared to be able to move up into promotional opportunity positions. Then council member Jennifer Reynolds says that, well, Hispanic employees in the government was super low. And then Sally Hamilton, who's the chief administrative officer, says, well, there's a lot of work to do. Black, Hispanic, and female workers feel like they're sometimes locked into lower positions with no ability to move up. Entire conversation, a waste of tax dollars, of taxpayer dollars in Lexington to talk about how they need to hire and promote more people the right skin color and gender. Not having a conversation about how do we promote people who have the right skills? How do we promote the kinds of people that can deliver the best value per tax dollar to our citizens? Who's going to do the best job? That was never asked. It was just assumed that for somehow making sure we hit the racial quota and the skin color quota for all positions across the entire city is somehow going to result in a better living situation for Lexingtonians. And you know what? It won't. Instead, it'll be worse because our tax dollars will be going to, like they were talking about, training programs for specifically women and minorities instead of training programs for everyone. So everybody has an opportunity to advance. And those who are the cream of the crop, regardless, once again, of race or skin color, are the ones who get promoted. That's how we get the best bang for our buck out of our elected officials. But that is not something that apparently the Lexington City Council agrees with. Well, new school testing data and rankings has come out for Kentucky schools, public schools, and it spells disaster in all of our public schools, especially in Louisville with the JCPS school system. Imagine you had $11,400 to spend a year to educate your kid. That's the average amount that the public school spends per child in Kentucky. And then imagine I told you that I could offer you less than a 50% chance that if you gave me that money, your kid would be able to read, write, and do math at a profession level. Less than 50% chance. Would you give me that? Would you give me the money? Well, the results are in for Kentucky public schools, their data, their rankings, and it isn't good. Less than 50% of Kentucky public school children are proficient in reading, writing, and math. Less than 50%, meaning over half our kids are being failed by our current public school systems. And while that is awful for all of Kentucky, the results get even worse when you look at Jefferson County public schools. JCPS, or Jefferson County Public Schools, is in Louisville. For those of you who don't know or have heard JCPS but don't realize that's Louisville Public Schools, they certainly have no reason to hold their head high on these rankings. In fact, 12 schools in the bottom 5%. There's 12 schools in the bottom 5%, and 10 of those 12 schools are JCPS schools. 10 out of 12. That would be unacceptable at 11,400. But it gets even worse when you consider just how much JCPS spends. At over $2 billion a year budget, JCPS spends $20,000 a student, 20 grand a student. Imagine what kind of education you could give your child with a $20,000 a year to spend. A family of four could hire an individual teacher to work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and be paid more than the average teacher is in Kentucky by a significant amount. So clearly, this complete failure, it isn't a money problem. And the apologists, the people that want to pretend like it's not our public school system's administrators' fault, I'm not even going to blame the teachers necessarily. It's these administrators and how they're running things and where their focus is. It's their fault. And the apologists for them are going to say, well, they just need more money. They just need more money. That's the problem. We hear JCPS saying they're just not well funded enough at 20 grand a student, over 20 grand a student. They just need more money. Well, let me ask you, how much is it you need? How much is it? All these people out here that say our public education, they need more dollars. If you want kids to read and write and do math, if you want them to be able to do those things, you got to pony up. We need some more moolah. What's the figure? Is it $30,000 a student? $40,000 a student? How much do you need per student to make it happen? And you know what? None of them have ever done? Given us a dollar figure. They've never done it. They've never figured out. They don't go to the Kentucky legislature. They don't go to their local taxpayers and say, if you just give us X amount per student, at least 75% of the kids will be able to read, write, and do math. I'm not even asking 100%. Just tell me, what's the number for 75%? 75% proficiency rating. What is it? They don't have it. There's not a number that exists that can get it done. If it doesn't exist, it means it's not possible. And if there's not a dollar amount to make it fixed, then it tells me money isn't the issue. You are, not you, the listener, but you are the schools. Like, just give me a number. So what do we do to fix this? Well, this year we know that there's going to be a push for a constitutional amendment to allow school choice in Kentucky. And of course, we need that constitutional amendment because the state Supreme Court has priorly decided that our state constitution requires that state tax dollars can only go to public schools. They can't go to private schools or charter schools, private charter schools. And that was interpreted like that. So therefore, because in our constitution, it says that the state must provide a public school system. So they just took it to mean that. So if we want to even consider school choice, we have to have a constitutional amendment. Now, that would be a fight, of course. It looks like the legislature may go ahead and get that done, but there's many detractors against it. And, you know, one of the fights against it, and we've heard Governor Beshear repeat this several times over, is that public dollars should go to public schools, which is an interesting argument to make. It's kind of just said, once again, much like she's just a woman, so elect her argument that we heard for Sierra Enloe. These kinds of arguments, public dollars should just go to public schools, they just say it, but they're never asked, why is that the case? They say, well, because it's tax dollars. Well, no other part of government is it this way. Public tax dollars for paving roads don't go to public road paving crews. Most of the time, they go to private paving companies. Occasionally, you'll have your local road paving crews by the county or things like that, or pothole fillers, but you have private companies doing the vast, vast majority of it. In fact, public dollars go to private companies more often than anything else. Our state government is almost basically a contractor when it comes to everything. They're just a general contractor. They don't do many services for us exactly. The only services they really do themselves is collecting up our money and then handing it out to private companies to do the work. But for some reason, when it comes to public schools, that's not a possibility. But there's a second argument, and that goes into these rural school districts. Let's take, Garrett County for an example. Many parents in Garrett County work in bigger towns like Lexington, Richmond, Danville. And if school choice was in place, well, it'd be convenient and possible for those parents to take their kids to those outside schools. And that would take funding away, because it's per student funding, from that local public school where there would still be a demand for, and now they're having to educate kids. And if they lose even 20%, 30% of their student body, they may not be able to afford to offer the same level of services and facilities to those kids. And that is a real issue and something that needs to be considered. And understand, passing a constitutional amendment doesn't make school choice happen the next day. What it does is it now opens up the opportunity for us to have a real discussion about how we fix this, because these local rural schools, a lot of times they're fine. A lot of times they have a good engagement with their community. They're not doing the wrong thing. But when you get outside these rural areas, when you get into JCPS, spending $20,000 a student and having 10 out of the 12 worst schools in the state in that district, that's not doing the right thing. That's not getting it done. And those areas need a solution. And that solution, I believe, could be school choice, but without an amendment, we can't even have the discussion. Well, y'all, that's what we have time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Thank you all so much for joining us. I hope you all have a great weekend. We'll see you guys back here Monday. Till then, we'll see you.